Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying Volume 3, Chapters 31 through 40. I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. The way that we do this program is I invite students in Zoom to volunteer to read a chapter from the book, and then after a student reads that chapter, I will share some teachings on that, and then I'll open up to any and all questions that you guys have. This is more of a study group versus a traditional style of learning where I teach certain content for 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes and then open up to questions, and then teach another 15, 20, 30 minutes and open up to questions. So this is more of a study group where we can come together and learn the teachings and discuss them and be sure that people have the opportunity to understand what it is that the Buddha is teaching. The Buddha taught very clear, very concise, and very precise, but it really helps to have a dedicated practitioner and a dedicated teacher kind of guide you through. You're on your own independent journey to enlightenment, but you're going to need help from teachers and guides along the way. So what I do in this program is invite students to get very deep into the words of the Buddha after they've already maybe studied some of the foundational programs that I share, and then allow students to come into a program like this to be able to really get in depth with the words of the Buddha through volumes 2 through 13 of the book series that I share, where volume 1 is more of a foundation. So I'm going to invite those of you guys that are in Zoom, if you'd like to volunteer to read, just let me know by electronically raising your hand, and then I'll be able to call on you. And if there's anyone in Facebook or YouTube, as you guys have questions, you're welcome to ask those by putting them into the comment section. Even in Zoom, you can ask questions that way too by putting them into the comment section. But for those of you guys in Zoom, all you need to do is electronically raise your hand and then unmute your mic and be able to read or ask any questions that you like. So I see, Pat, you had your hand up first, so we'll go to you. And then Helena, I see you're next. So maybe you can read chapter 32.
Chapter 31, Craving, desire is the root of discontentedness. Whatever discontentedness arose in the past, all that arose rooted in craving, desire, with craving, desire as its source. For craving, desire is the root of discontentedness. Whatever discontentedness will arise in the future, all that will arise rooted in craving, desire, with craving, desire as its source. For craving, desire is the root of discontentedness. Whatever discontentedness arises, all that is rooted in craving, desire, has craving, desire as its source. For craving, desire is the root of discontentedness.
Okay, thank you, sir. So here, the Buddha spells it out in no uncertain terms of exactly what causes discontentedness. And remember, all of his teachings are independently verifiable. For those of you guys that have learned in the foundational programs, you've learned the Four Noble Truths with me, and I walked you through developing your understanding of the three universal truths and the Four Noble Truths, so you can see clearly that it's craving, desire, attachment, wants, expectation, longing, yearning that is causing all discontentedness, whether it's pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. These conditioned feelings are caused by craving, desire, attachment. And the Buddha here is just making it utterly clear that any discontentedness you or any other being experienced in the past, it all came from craving, desire, attachment. Any discontentedness you'll experience in the future, it's all from craving, desire, attachment, either you or other beings. And then any discontentedness that is experienced in the present moment, at all, anywhere whatsoever. It's all rooted in craving, desire, attachment. And you're invited to be able to independently verify this, because oftentimes what the mind does in the unenlightened state with the lack of this wisdom is we'll blame other people for what we experience and with discontentedness. And because of this, one stays continually trapped in this continuous cycle of experiencing discontentedness over and over. But by independently verifying that your own mind is causing your discontentedness, that's what the Buddha is teaching you, that it's the mind's longing, yearning, wanting things to be a certain way, craving permanence. That's what's causing the conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. By understanding that and cultivating that wisdom and seeing the truth in it, then you can actually apply the real techniques and the training to be able to eradicate the discontentedness. Because if you can eradicate the cause, then you can eradicate the effect. Because if what's causing discontentedness is craving, desire, attachment, all you need to do in order to eliminate the anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings is eliminate the cause, which is the craving, desire, attachment. And that's the beauty of understanding something like this. So let me know if you guys have questions here on this chapter. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So it looks like Helena has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So what exactly is the root of craving, desire, attachment? Because we know that anger comes from ill will. And what's the root of craving, desire, attachment?
It's ignorance, the unknowing of true reality. You learn this through dependent origination, that it's because of the lack of wisdom, the misunderstanding, the misperception. This is the root of craving and what causes craving in the mind.
Okay, and could it be said that it's like also survival, maybe?
No, because you can survive without craving. If survival was the root of craving, when you eliminate craving, then you wouldn't be able to survive.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So Helena, if you'd like to read this next chapter since you already volunteered.
7 principles to prosper and not decline. Brahmin, if the Vajrayans keep these 7 principles, as long as these principles remain in force, the Vajrayans may be predicted to prosper and not decline. The followings are the 7 principles that the Tathagata said to Venerable Ananda in the presence of Vasakara Brahmi. Ananda, the Vajrayans hold regular and frequent assemblies. Ananda, the Vajrayans meet in harmony, break up in harmony, and carry on their business in harmony. Ananda, the Vajrayans do not authorize what has not been authorized already, and do not abolish what has been authorized, but proceed according to what has been authorized by their ancient tradition. Ananda, the Vajrayans honor, respect, revere, and salute the elders among them and consider them worth listening to. Ananda, the Vajrayans do not forcibly abduct others' wives and daughters and compel them to live with them. Ananda, the Vajrayans honor, respect, revere, and salute the Vajrayans' shrines at home and abroad, the proper support made and given before. Ananda, the Vajrayans make proper provision for the safety of arahants, so that such arahants may come in the and those already there may. Ananda, so long as they keep these principles, the Vajrayans may be predicted to prosper and not decline.
Okay, thank you, Helena. So here, the Buddha is once again, like he usually does, is teaching the natural law of karma, of cause and effect. There were 2 populations of people during the lifetime of the Buddha that he looked at and revered for their practice of the teachings. And remember, that they weren't necessarily practicing his teachings. They were practicing certain aspects of the natural law of Gama that the Buddha could identify and say, yeah, these people are actually practicing the teachings, that are the natural laws of existence. Because these natural laws, they show up in many different parts of society. In fact, I met someone here in Mexico yesterday or 2 days ago that he's never really studied the path to enlightenment very closely, but he's doing so many things that is very similar to the path to enlightenment. Like he sleeps on the floor, he lives very modest existence, even though he's actually has quite a bit of money. He, is quite humble in the way that he talks. He's very interested in learning and growing and developing. He's practices a lot of generosity, and this person has never actually studied with me or the teachings that I'm sharing from the Buddha. So people learn these teachings in various ways because there's the natural laws, and the Buddha put it together in a complete package that you can learn and you can understand, and you can then experience the results because you have the complete package of what it takes to get to enlightenment. But there's different times where you'll see that he talks about the Vajrayans or the Khattiyas, and he's talking about them as a population of people that are practicing certain aspects of the natural laws of existence that are very beneficial for their population. And he encourages people to practice these similar types of qualities because it's going to help an individual to experience improved results in their life because of this cause and effect, or this action and result. So here the Buddha starts out with saying, okay, Ananda, the Vajrayans hold regular and frequent assemblies, meaning they come together in community and they talk and have discussion and communicate with each other. They sit down and have communication. This is very helpful in a community of people, whether it's your friends and family, or whether it's like a business or a company, or any type of population of people. There needs to be some frequent understanding and regularly coming together and having discussions. I know, like when I was in the IT field and I had 55 employees, the idea of 55 people being on board with the same exact things without having ever talked to each other would be nearly impossible. So what we used to do is we'd have weekly or bi-weekly meetings where we would come together for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, and we would have like group meetings where we were presenting certain information to help the entire group of 55 employees to understand various aspects of the projects that we were involved in. And because of this, there was more cohesion in the group. And that's what a situation like this, where there's regular and frequent meetings of a particular population, whether it's a company, whether it's a family, whether it's a community and like a neighborhood, there's going to be more cohesion in the group because people will be understanding each other's perspectives and their thoughts and what they're doing in life. So that's why the Buddha is sharing this, that it's wise to have regular and frequent meetings with a certain population of people, whether you're an employer, whether you're in a neighborhood or community, whether you're just in a family, you're having gatherings, or like our community, we come together weekly and we meet and help each other through our interaction. Ananda, the Vajrayans meet in harmony, break up in harmony, and carry on their business in harmony. This is related to their moral conduct and the way that they interact with each other. Instead of being bitter and harsh and hostile, when they come together, they're harmonious with each other, smiling, happy, cheerful. When they leave from each other, they're cheerful and happy and bright. And when they're actually conducting their business, they're doing that in harmony rather than being aggressive and hostile and bitter. We've recently had some situations at the temple over the last month where we had two different situations where there were some individuals who were being bitter and harsh and hostile, and you can see that it doesn't promote harmony in the group. And for such a long time we haven't seen any of that at the temple whatsoever. But in those rare situations where someone's brand new to our community and they come in and they're maybe bitter and harsh and hostile, you see that it doesn't promote the best environment for people to learn and grow and develop and understand. But when we meet in harmony, break up in harmony, carry on our business in harmony, of course, there's going to be disagreements. There's going to be people who might disagree one person to the other, but that doesn't mean we need to be bitter and harsh and hostile with each other. We can carry on our business and have discussions in polite, kind, friendly, respectful ways, and this is going to promote much success among any population of people. Then the Buddha says here that the Vajrayans do not authorize what has not been authorized already and do not abolish what has been authorized, but proceed according to what has been authorized by their ancient tradition. So what he's talking about here is like certain ways of conducting themselves in a population of people. Maybe they've set certain aspects of like maybe this group of the village retrieves their water from the well on Monday and Tuesday, and this group of the neighborhood retrieves their water on Wednesday and Thursday, and maybe they space it out like this so that the water in the well doesn't get depleted, right? And this is what this group of people would have had, is different certain things like that they've learned about the land that they occupy and the way that they interact with each other, about how they conduct themselves in a way that's going to promote success for all members of the community. So here he's saying, okay, the Vajrayans don't authorize what has not been authorized already, and do not abolish what has been authorized. Because if you've learned how to live your life a certain way, and it's wise to live this way, the Buddha is saying, okay, don't abolish those wise things that you're doing. Right? So then here we go on to number 4, which is the Vajrayans honor, respect, revere, and salute the elders among them and consider them worth listening to. Where if you are in a community of people where there's older people, maybe 50, 60, 70 years old, 80 years old, these individuals are that age for a reason, because they had a certain amount of wisdom and they made certain wise decisions that allowed them to get to that particular point in their life. And now there's certain wisdom that you can learn from people who are older than you. And there's obviously things you can learn from people that are younger than you too. But what the Buddha teaches is to honor, respect, revere, and salute people who are older than us, because it's their wisdom that's going to help us to improve our life today. Where in some societies, we don't honor, respect, revere, and salute elders. And because of this, we see a lack of cohesion in that community or that population. So the Buddha teaches us to honor and respect all beings, including the elders in our communities, because this is where a community is going to be able to cultivate wisdom and develop wisdom throughout their time of spending time with each other in a community. And then this one is interesting, that the Vajrayans don't forcibly abduct others' wives and daughters and compel them to live with them. So this must have been something that was going on in other communities, not the Vajrayans, but other communities must have been doing this. And of course, that's going to promote a lot of unwholesomeness and a lot of unwholesome karma. So this particular group of people, while it was maybe commonplace in other communities to do this, this group of people chose not to do that. And the Buddha is saying, okay, this is going to promote cohesion within this group. The Vajrayans honor, respect, revere, and salute the Vajrayan shrines at home and abroad, not withdrawing the proper support made and given before. I'm not 100% sure what the Buddha is referring to here as shrines, other than perhaps maybe shrines that honor the elders and things like that, because by honoring things of the past, it really helps an individual to be able to cultivate respect and gratitude for the people that exist today. You don't really see the Buddha talking about, rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, because those things don't lead to enlightenment. But here I suspect what he's talking about are monuments and things like this that are to honor the people of the past, because by honoring the people of the past, it helps you to cultivate honor and respect in your mind for the people that you presently live with and that you're around. And this is going to promote harmony and cohesion within your population of people. And then the last one here, which the Buddha frequently teaches in a way that he leaves the last one to be the most important. Here, this is the case as well here, is that the Vajrayans make proper provisions for the safety of arahants, so that such arahants may come in the future to live there, and those already there may reside in comfort. So an arahant is an enlightened being. If a population of people are making it comfortable for people to come in who are enlightened and be able to exist there, then this is really good for that population of people. Anytime an enlightened being enters into a community or population of people, that individual is going to be able to help countless individuals. And if you're making provisions for their safety, meaning that you're providing them food and water and clothing and shelter and medical care, if there's any kind of hostility or bitterness in that community, they're making sure that that's not coming towards the enlightened beings. And because of this, there'll be enlightened beings that'll be pleased to come into that community, spend time, and then help those individuals to be able to then learn what it takes to be able to transform their mind and train their mind. The more enlightened beings a community has, the better for that community, because there's more wisdom in the community to be shared with other people of how to get to the enlightened mental state. And I oftentimes will point to the population of Thai people, that during the lifetime of the Buddha, it was these Vajrayans and Khattiyas that the Buddha was pointing to in a way that was functioning in these particular ways. I would point to, during our lifetime, the population of Thai people in Thailand, that they honor, respect, revere, and salute their elders. They take very good care of their elders, and they do all of these things that the Buddha is talking about, including making it safe for arahants or enlightened beings to exist. And by doing so, more and more wisdom comes into the community. When Thai people know that somebody's enlightened, they really revere that individual, and they make sure that there's opportunity for this individual to be able to teach within the community, because they know that that's going to be very helpful and very impactful for the community to have this wisdom coming into the community. So we see that in Thailand, it tends to be considered to be a very peaceful, comfortable place to exist, even for foreigners to come there. Many people enjoy coming to Thailand because of that. And in my opinion, it's because of these types of things that the Buddha is talking about here, because there's this cause and effect and action and result that's going to promote and produce any particular effect or result as part of practicing and making decisions in this way. So let me know if you guys have any questions on this particular chapter. This is chapter 32, 7 Principles to Prosper and Not Decline. Okay, so Helena has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. So I would like to understand better point number 3 about authorizing what has not authorizing what has not been authorized, etc. Because to me it sounds like lack of innovation. And when I think about like some old traditions, like slavery was legal once, child labor, stuff like that. So hadn't we changed that at one point, we would experience the unwholesome results right now. So could you please explain it?
Yeah, in my opinion, what this is referring to is like certain ways that people have learned to live cohesively within their population of people. It's not talking about human laws and whether slavery is legal or illegal or things like that. This is more about, like I was describing an example of maybe like, out of this, 5,000 villagers, this group accesses the well on these days and this group accesses it on these days, rather than all 5,000 people going to the well and drawing their water, which can deplete the well and dry up the well. There are certain things that they've created in communities to ensure that certain things are conducted with ease. So for example, like in my village, we have about 120 houses in Thailand, and there's a gate and there's security there. And when you come in as a villager, we have this little key fob that we hold up, and it opens up the gate for us. And if we don't have our key fob, or if it's not working, there's a security there that presses it and opens it up. And this is a certain thing that the community has decided that they would like to do in order to ensure that only people coming into the village are people who are authorized to be there. And then when there's like deliveries and things like this, those people stop at the gate, they give their ID, they give them like a little slip of paper, and then they come to our house, they deliver the package or deliver the pizza or whatever it is, and then it gets stamped by the homeowner, that then when they go back to the gate, they retrieve their ID, so that then the security guard knows that, okay, this person actually went into the village, they saw somebody who lives here, that person stamped them, meaning that everything's okay, and now we can give their ID back. Now, I think that the Thai people do this, and I don't know that, unwholesome things are happening in certain villages. Sometimes I think this is like just window dressing in order to kind of like greet people and stuff like this. Like, I've never experienced anything unsafe in any of the communities that I live in, like the village that I live in now. But this is the kind of thing that I suspect that the Buddha was talking about, is like certain ways that a community of people have decided that we're going to do this thing. Where like if I just barged into the gate and I didn't do what was prescribed by the villagers, I would be kind of going against what it is that the villagers have created. And this isn't going to be creating a cohesive, prosperous community, because now I'm going against what the community has decided, like we would like to kind of monitor the people who are coming in and out of this gate.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let me check Facebook and YouTube. See if we have any questions there. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions there. So let's go to chapter 33. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, it looks like Vibhav has his hand up. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. 4 things that lead to the continuation of the wholesome teachings. There are amongst these non-decline. What for? Here, the monks learn discourses that have been well acquired with well set down words and phrases. When the words and phrases are well set down, the meaning is well understood. This is the first thing that leads to the continuation, non-decline, and non-disappearance of the wholesome teachings. Second, again, the monks are easy to correct and possess qualities that make them easy to and accept instruction respectfully. This is the second thing that leads to the continuation, non-decline, and non-disappearance of the wholesome teachings. 3. Again, those monks who are learned, heirs to the heritage, experts in the teachings, experts in the discipline, carefully teach the discourse to the others. When they have passed away, the discourses are not cut off at the root, for there are those who preserve them. This is the third thing that leads to continuation, non-decline, and non-disappearance of the wholesome teachings. 4. Again, the elder monks are not luxurious and complacent, but they discard backsliding and take the lead in solitude. They arouse energy for the day as it unattained, for the achievement of as yet unachieved, for the realization of the yet as yet unrealized. Those in the next generation follow the example. They too do not become luxurious and complacent, sliding and take the lead in solitude. They too, for the yet unattained, for the achievement of the yet as yet unachieved, for the realization of the as yet unrealized. This is the fourth thing that leads to the continuation, non-decline, and non-disappearance of the wholesome teaching. Continuation, non-decline, and non-disappearance of the wholesome teachings.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. I apologize for anyone who's listening by audio only, that my internet connection is not so great, so we're kind of losing some of the reading of the text. But for those of you guys that are listening to audio only, you can access these books from our website, buddhadailywisdom.com. From there, you can download volume 3 and you can see the full discourse. Here, what Vibhav just read and what the Buddha is talking about is how to ensure that his teachings continue in the world, because his teachings continuing in the world is the very best thing that could ever happen for the entire world, because these teachings absolutely lead to liberation of the mind, freedom from strong feelings, to peace, to joy, to enlightenment. And it's through understanding these teachings that more and more of the world can experience the peace and joy of the enlightened mental state. So here the Buddha is giving guidance of how to ensure his teachings continue in the world, because he's impermanent. He's going to ultimately die, and people are going to be interested to know how to ensure that the maintenance of his teachings continues in the world. So he's giving these 4 things to ensure his teachings continue. The first one, he says, the monks learn discourses that have been well acquired, with well set down words and phrases. When the words and phrases are well set down, the meaning is well understood. Right? So any teacher who's choosing to teach these teachings, they need to be very conscious and very aware of the words and phrases that they share, because that's going to ensure that their students are actually learning and understanding the true teachings and what it takes to move the mind to enlightenment. If we are haphazard about the way that we describe the teachings and the words that we use, then the students aren't going to be able to deeply understand the teachings. They're not going to be able to learn them well. So then when they are shared, they're going to be slowly modified, and the quality of the words and phrases are going to slowly deteriorate. And over multiple years and generations, then slowly but surely, the ability to get to enlightenment starts to disappear. So maintaining well set down words and phrases is so important for the continuation of the teachings of the Buddha. Then the monks are easy to correct and possess qualities that make them easy to correct. They are patient and accept instruction respectfully. One of the parts of the path to enlightenment is a teacher needs to be able to point out to their students the areas that they need to improve. This is one of the reasons why students need a teacher, is that you need guidance to learn the actual teachings, but you need somebody who can objectively look at your own mind and look at your own practice and share with you in ways where you're maybe not practicing right speech, or maybe you're not being as loving and kind and compassionate as you could be, or maybe your mind is having difficulties concentrating and being focused. The Buddha talks about this in other discourses that we've already studied in this program, where he talks about how a teacher points out treasure to their students, and it's up to the student to be able to see that treasure. But sometimes with a unenlightened being, as a student, they can have ego in the mind, so that when a teacher is pointing out ways that they can improve, their mind doesn't accept that instruction respectfully. And in those situations, it's not hurting the teacher, because the teacher should be either enlightened or very close to it, but it's only hurting the student themselves, that when they reject the teachings, this is going to hinder them from being able to make progress on the path. So any student who's choosing to learn from a teacher, it's that student's choice to select that teacher as somebody that they are interested to learn with. A teacher shouldn't just push their way into a student's life and start trying to teach them, because that would be this teacher's own craving and their own ego. Instead, a student needs to be the one who makes a decision that this is a person that I'm interested in learning with. And then once they've made that decision, if they're open to learning and being able for the teacher to point out areas of improvement, this is going to really accelerate their practice. And by them becoming more and more wise, more and more enlightened, this is going to ensure that the teachings continue in the world. Not only is it going to help that particular student, but it's going to help the teachings continue in the world. So one of the things that a teacher might decide to do is, when a student first starts learning with the teacher, it would be unwise to just jump in there and start correcting them on the things that they're doing that are needing improvement. But if a student continues to learn, they see 2, 3, 4, 5 different times the student is coming to learn with the teacher, at this point, the student has obviously made the choice to learn with you as a teacher. And that's the point where maybe a teacher might decide to start sharing some improvements with their students. But even in doing that, it's really wise to be sure that the student is open to that improvement and that suggestions from the teacher. So sometimes when I'm unsure if a student is willing to accept individual guidance like that, then I will actually ask them. I'll say, hey, are you interested in understanding more about how you can improve? Because oftentimes what a teacher is seeing in the student are things that the student's not seeing themselves. Because if a student saw those things themselves, they wouldn't be practicing those things. So by a teacher being able to objectively look at a student's practice and provide them corrections, and then the student respectfully receiving that guidance, not only is the student becoming more and more enlightened and cultivating more and more wisdom and improving their practice, but it allows the teachings to continue and prosper in the world, because now there's more and more wisdom in the world about what it takes to get to enlightenment. And that particular individual is going to be getting closer and closer to enlightenment, to then be able to potentially share that same wisdom with somebody else. Here, the third one, the Buddha is saying, those monks who are learned, heirs to the heritage, experts on the teachings, experts on the discipline, experts on the outlines, respectfully teach the discourses to others. When they have passed away, the discourses are not cut off at the root, for there are those who preserve them. So the second one is all about the student receiving guidance respectfully. Right? This one is about the teacher being respectful, because in order for there to be a harmonious relationship between a teacher and a student and a teacher, there needs to be respect in both directions, right? If it's only the student that's showing respect to the teacher and the teacher's not showing respect to the students, it's not going to promote a harmonious relationship. So here, the Buddha is talking about how individuals who deeply understand the teachings and are experts on the teachings respectfully share those with others, because it's very hard for the unenlightened mind to grasp some of these teachings, because the mind is struggling with craving, anger, and ignorance in these various pollutions. And a teacher needs to be very good with their practice to be able to practice right speech, to deliver the teachings in such a way that the student's mind can absorb that and be able to see areas for improvement. So there needs to be respect in both directions, from student to teacher, but also from teacher to student as well. And this will promote the best opportunity for the teachings to flourish in the world. And then lastly, the way the Buddha is talking about ensuring that the teachings continue in the world is that those people who are well developed in their practice, here he's referring to them as elder monks, people who are deeply learned and deeply steeped in the teachings, they're not luxurious and complacent, but instead they discard backsliding, meaning regression or decline on the path. They discard that they're not interested in backsliding, that they only work towards future progress on the path, rather than becoming complacent and just allowing their mind to regress, because when you're in the jhanas, the mind can regress. So you'd like to always be focusing on forward progression. And then he talks about taking the lead in solitude, meaning going out and being alone and learning how to train your mind to be alone. Because oftentimes the mind is craving to always be in contact with other people and be around other people. But you need to be able to go on vacations by yourself, take trips by yourself, go to the restaurant by yourself, go on a hike by yourself, go to the art museum by yourself, go to the movies by yourself. Do these things sometimes alone. Of course, you're going to do those things with other people sometimes, but by doing these things alone, this will help you to promote the interest in spending time with this being who you are. Oftentimes, if the mind is bombarded with a lot of unwholesome thoughts, you might think the way to solve that is just always have people around you, but you can't accomplish the elimination of unwholesome thoughts in your mind by just having lots of people around you all the time. You're going to need to sit with your thoughts and purify your mind, and by being alone, you can see your thoughts and you can see what's going on in the mind and make plans for the future. And you can also cultivate enjoyment of spending time alone. If you don't enjoy being alone with yourself, who would ever enjoy being alone with you, right? If you don't enjoy being alone with yourself, why would any of your friends or family enjoy being with you? So you're going to need to learn how to enjoy spending time alone and find that interesting and helpful and beneficial. So the Buddha is talking about not only those things, but here he's talking about they arouse energy, meaning motivation, encouragement, enthusiasm for the attainment of the as yet unattained. Meaning if someone's in the jhanas, you have enthusiasm and ambition to get to the first stage of enlightenment. Or if you're in the first stage of enlightenment, you have enthusiasm and ambition to get to the second or third or fourth stage of enlightenment. That's what he's talking about here. For the achievement of the as yet unachieved, same thing. For the realization of the as yet unrealized, same thing. Having enthusiasm for continuous growth on the path. And then because of that, the next generation will also have that same enthusiasm and energy and motivation and ambition. And that's going to be producing more and more prosperous development of the teachings to be able to be shared in the world, because these people who are more deeply soaked in the teachings, the newer members of the community coming along will be able to see that and continue to grow. So now our community that we've had, I've been teaching again since 2018, that's 6 years. There's some students that have been learning with me for 5 or 6 years. There's some that have joined in the last few months. There's some that have been around for a year or 2 or 3. If you guys are focused on continuous growth and in development, when there's this new student who comes in and they're only there for a day or two, they just started to learn, they'll see like the senior members of this community are focused on growth and development and training their mind. Those new students will be more readily able to come into our community and experience benefit and growth and development on the path to enlightenment, because they have these examples, they have these role models of people that have been in the community for a period of time and practicing the teachings deeply, that they can see how this community doesn't gossip, we don't slander, we're not bitter and harsh and hostile to each other, we treat each other with respect and politeness and kindness. And when these 2 examples that I was mentioning over the last month of where individuals at the temple have been bitter and harsh and hostile, all the other members of the community just sat in silence and they allowed the teacher to handle that situation. And we could see that we weren't vindictive, we weren't angry, we weren't hostile or bitter towards this person. We just understood that this person was struggling with whatever challenges they were struggling with. And this is really good learning for people to be able to see those examples of senior members of the community practicing the teachings closely. And this will ensure that the teachings just continue to have success and prosper in the world. So any questions on this particular chapter, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. This is chapter 33, 4 things that lead to the continuation of the wholesome teachings. Okay, looks like Helena has a question, and maybe Vibhav as well. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. So what caught my attention here is that the Buddha talks about discipline, right? That the monks should be masters of the discipline. And could you please comment on that further? What is the meaning of being disciplined on this path?
Discipline would be the training. Like, for example, when we're teaching, like, just to take something simple like the 5 precepts. You know, we teach about not killing or stealing or sexual misconduct or lying or intoxicants. We go into a lot of detail on what those things mean. That's the understanding and the wisdom of how to discipline the mind and how to train the mind, or like maybe like 2 to 3 meditations for 30 minutes or more. This is part of the discipline or part of the training. When you see the word discipline, you can think the word training, experts on the training of the mind. That's what he's referring to here.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Vibhav. What's your question, sir?
David, I'm just wondering, with such very well laid down, I guess even Buddha basically laid down the phrases and messaging really well. How did it come to a point where people actually did not, like, it's been stopped following these well laid down phrases and words and following, and then went in their own direction, and then over time the teaching declined, because what you see today in the world is like kind of very different from what the Buddha is saying here.
Yeah, so the easy answer to that is impermanence. That impermanence affects all things, including people's memory of these teachings, including the books and things like that. That impermanence affects all these things. And here, what the Buddha is describing of what leads to the continuation of the wholesome teachings, the very next discourse here are the things that lead to the decline, where the Buddha is teaching you just the opposite of what we just talked about, is that he's talking about the things that lead to decline and disappearance of the wholesome teachings. So these are the things that occurred over the 2,500 years. We're not actually going to read this one, but I'll just integrate it in here since you asked this question, is that the monks learn discourses that have been badly acquired with badly set down words and phrases. When the words and phrases are badly set down, the meaning is badly understood, right? So that's one of the reasons. And then the monks are difficult to correct and possess qualities that make them difficult to correct. They are impatient and do not accept instruction respectfully. That's what's led to the decline. You can see this if you spend time around individuals. You can see that what the Buddha is teaching here is 100% true. And then monks who are learned, heirs of the heritage, experts on the teachings, experts on the discipline, experts on the outline, do not respectfully teach the discourses. In other words, they're being disrespectful to their students. You can see this even today in various communities. You can see teachers who are disrespectful to their students. And then here, the fourth one, where individuals are luxurious and complacent, and they are, having backsliding, that they're not taking the initiative to go into solitude, that they don't have this ambition and energy and enthusiasm to attain the as yet unattained. So this is the reason why things disappeared to the point where they are now. But this community, we're interested in practicing this first one, chapter 33. We're interested in seeing the teachings continue to prosper in the world and continue in the world, because we know how important they are, because we've seen in our own life the improvement that they've made within our own mind and our own life. But there's going to be other people that don't understand that. And because of impermanence, not everybody understands the teachings in the same way. So they will gradually decline from the time of a Buddha, like Gotama Buddha. But there's the potential for these teachings to continue to prosper and continue in the world if there's an individual who brings them into the world in such a way that they set up all the ways that the teachings can continue. And nowadays, we have that opportunity to be able to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have any questions anywhere else. Looks like Helena has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. So following up on Vibhav's question, if the teachings decline naturally due to impermanence, why aren't there more Buddhas in the world? Like there could be one every 500. Why not?
Yeah, it doesn't happen that way. What you'll see in your own personal life, maybe you can also relate this to humanity, is sometimes, an individual has to hit rock bottom before they're motivated to be able to then do something better. And in my perspective, humanity has reached rock bottom. And more people are starting to realize, like, whoa, what we're doing is not helpful. It's not going to lead to a harmonious community, a harmonious world. And, you need a lot of time for humanity to go through periods of time where they're struggling and having all these difficulties, so that when a Buddha does come into the world, there can be individuals who realize, like, whoa, this is a better way to live life. Whereas if it was every 500 years, a group of people wouldn't necessarily decline to the point where we see today, that people would essentially hit rock bottom. Because that's one of the biggest motivators for people on the path to enlightenment, is that when an individual is really hitting rock bottom, that's a time that they'll oftentimes pay the most attention to the teachings. Whereas if your life is pretty peaceful and pretty joyful, there tends to not be motivation to learn the teachings, because there's not very much difficulties and struggles in your life. Like the individual that I was talking about that I met here 2 days ago, his life is pretty peaceful. He has some problems here and there, but when it really came down to it and we were talking, he's not interested in the path to enlightenment. He would like to be reborn as an animal, it seems like. He's holding on to existence, and his life is pretty peaceful. He's got what he needs. He's not at rock bottom. So that's usually what it takes for an individual, but also a group of individuals, to be able to decide that they would like to embrace something like the teachings of the Buddha.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Vibhav, you have a question?
So I just had a follow-up question on, you said that the gentleman you met wishes to be born like an animal, like, because is he to be? I mean, it seems like he has a very peaceful existence, and he's doing a lot of generosity, and he's doing a lot of the good things that are in the teachings. So from that perspective, it seems unlikely that he'll be born as an animal.
Yeah, exactly.
He's doing, I don't know, but maybe born as an animal, but from what you're describing, it's very, very unlikely he'll be born as an animal, from what you're saying.
That's the ironic thing of it, is that he craves that. I don't know that he craves to be reborn as an animal, but he, definitely craving existence. But he's practicing the teachings without realizing that's what he's actually doing. But ultimately, by the end of our conversation, he really enjoyed the conversation that we had. He said he would like to have more conversations, and he said in the future he could potentially change his mind in a different direction. And one of the things that I shared with him is, I said, I'm not here to convince you of doing any one particular thing or another. And he appreciated that, right? So I wasn't there to convince him to get on the path to enlightenment, but I just acknowledged that based on the things that he was sharing, that he was not on the path to enlightenment. But that's mainly because he doesn't understand what the path to enlightenment is. Once you understand what it is and you've deeply penetrated into that wisdom, I can't imagine any one person deciding that, yeah, I'd rather be angry and bitter and harsh and hostile and aggressive and have sadness and misery and despair and displeasure over this permanent peace and joy. Of course, there's going to be people out there that do that because of impermanence. But if you deeply understand what the enlightened mind truly is, which is hard for someone to fathom in the unenlightened state, if people truly understood what enlightenment was, there wouldn't be any individual who would be disinterested in enlightenment. But because people lack the wisdom of what enlightenment truly is, there's people in the world that just aren't interested, because they just don't understand what it is.
Yeah, sorry, one more follow-up question on that. So in some of the discussions I've had with people, most people don't understand unless you start doing something, nobody really understands what anyway, but it's even harder for someone who's just starting on it, right? And for a lot of people, it's a leap of faith, really, to say, okay, I'll go to Teacher David because I believe he's saying the right thing about enlightenment, and maybe I'll get there, maybe I won't, but at least I'll progress on the path to some extent, and I'll improve the condition of mind. And the question there is, like, how do we, not to convince people, but how to even show them, how do we even show the way to people, even if you don't get to enlightenment, and this probably will be a goal at some point while progressing on the path. But even if you do a little bit of it, like the Buddha said, even one sentence will improve your life. How do we kind of give that framework to people to say, even if your enlightenment is not your final goal, if you even get it for some period of time, will actually help you?
Yeah, at this stage in your At this stage in your practice, Vibhav, I don't suggest that you try to teach anybody really. I mean, if you have a couple small things that can help an individual, fine. But when it really comes to helping someone firmly get on the path to enlightenment, they're going to need to be talking with a dedicated teacher who deeply understands the Four Noble Truths, because that's the real entrance to the path to enlightenment. That's where people's mind starts to really open up. In fact, there were some other people that I met here in Mexico in the last couple of days, and they were like, hey, I was thinking to arrange my entire schedule to attend your entire course, and that was my intention, and I set everything up to the point where I thought I'd be able to attend your course, but I kind of messed things up, and my schedule isn't set up based on your course. But I would like to come to your course, but it looks like I'm only going to be able to come one day out of the 5 days. And I suggested to them the day to come is on Tuesday, because that's the day where I'm going to be teaching the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, and the Eightfold Path. That's where somebody firmly gets onto the path to enlightenment. And it takes a certain amount of wisdom and understanding to be able to teach those particular teachings in a way that somebody can firmly get onto the path to enlightenment. That in order for somebody to deeply understand, that they're going to have to understand those teachings. And that's why what I do with these courses is kind of warm people up to understanding the Four Noble Truths by first helping them understand what enlightenment is. But that's really the way to help someone firmly get on the path, is to understand the Four Noble Truths. And that way they're not taking a leap of faith, they're not believing, but they can see that this person articulated in a 45-minute period of exactly what's causing the anger and the sadness and frustration. And it's something that they can independently prove through the teachings that they receive. And now they can at least have some level of confidence that, okay, this teacher knows a thing or two about the path to enlightenment, and now I will potentially get onto the path. And also, being around a teacher can be really helpful for that too. That if you're around a person who's either enlightened or very close to it, you can see that in no situation, no matter what's happening, their mind is steady and stable and peaceful and joyful. And for any students who've been around for any period of time, they can see that from a teacher, that they can see that the teacher has been in various different situations, but nothing shakes up their mind. And they can see like, whoa, if that happened to me, I would have been very upset, but this particular teacher wasn't at all. Still loving and very kind and very polite and respectful. And this can help build a person's confidence to spend time with their teacher, not just in the classroom, but outside the classroom too. And they can see various situations that this person never experiences any discontentedness whatsoever.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere else. So let's go to the next one, which is chapter 34. I wasn't planning to discuss this one because it's just the opposite of the one that we just discussed, where the Buddha is talking about the decline or disappearance of the wholesome teachings. It's just the opposite, and we've already kind of talked about that. So let's go right into chapter 35. Is there someone who would like to read this? All right, Keely, go ahead, ma'am.
Conditioned objects are impermanent. Monks, conditioned objects are impermanent. Conditioned objects are unstable. Conditioned objects are unreliable. It is enough to become dissatisfied with all conditioned objects, enough to become free from strong feelings toward them, enough to be liberated from them. Nero, the king of mountains, is 84,000 yojanas in length. Yojana 12 to 15 kms, 84,000 yojanas in width. It is submerged 84,000 yojana in the great ocean and rises up 84,000 yojana above the great ocean. 1. There comes a time rain does not fall for many years, for many hundreds of years, for many thousands of years, for many hundreds of thousands of years. When rain does not fall, seed life and vegetation, medicinal plants, grasses, and giant trees of the forest wither and dry up and no longer exist. So impermanent are conditioned objects, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough to become dissatisfied with all conditioned objects, enough to become free from strong feelings toward them, enough to be liberated from them. 2. There comes a time when, after a long time, a second sun appears. With the appearance of the second sun, the small rivers and lakes dry up and evaporate and no longer exist. So impermanent are conditioned objects, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough to become dissatisfied with all conditioned objects, enough to become free from strong feelings toward them, enough to be liberated from them. 3. There comes a time when, after a long time, a third sun appears. With the appearance of the third sun, the great rivers, the Ganges, the Yamuna, the Akhiravati, the Sarahu, and the Mahi dry up and evaporate and no longer exist. So impermanent are conditioned objects, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough to become dissatisfied with all conditioned objects, enough to become free from strong feelings towards them, enough to be liberated from them. 4. There comes a time when, after a long time, a fourth sun appears. With the appearance of the fourth sun, the great lakes from which those great rivers originate, Anotata, Sihapatata, Lahakala, Kanamukta, Kunala, Chadanta, and Mandatini, dry up and evaporate and no longer exist. So impermanent are conditioned objects, so unstable. It is enough to become dissatisfied with all conditioned objects, enough to become free from strong feelings towards them, enough to be liberated from them. 5. There comes, after a long time, a fifth sun appears. With the appearance of the fifth sun, the waters in the great ocean sink by 100 yojanas, 200 yojanas, 300 yojanas, 400 yojanas, 500 yojanas, 600 yojanas, 700 yojanas. The water left in the great ocean stands at the height of 7 palm trees, at the height of 6 palm trees, 5 palm trees, 4 palm trees, 3 palm trees, 2 palm trees, a mere palm tree. The water left in the great ocean stands at the height of 7 fathoms, 6 fathoms, 4 fathoms, 3 fathoms, 2 fathoms, a fathom, 1.8 meters. After half a fathom, up to the waist, up to the knees, up to the ankles. Just as in the autumn, when thick drops of rain are pouring down, the water stands in the hoof prints of castle here and there, so the waters left in the great ocean will stand here and there in pools, in the size of the hoof prints of castle. With the appearance of the fifth sun, the water left in the great ocean is not enough even to reach the joints of one's fingers. So impermanent are conditioned objects, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough to become dissatisfied with all conditioned objects, enough to become free from strong feelings toward them, enough to be liberated from them. 6. There comes a time when, after a long time, a sixth sun appears. With the appearance of the sixth sun, this great earth and sinew, the king of mountains, smoke, fume, and smolder. Just as a porter's fire, when kindled, first smokes, fumes, and smolders, so with the appearance of the sixth sun, this great earth and sinew, the king of mountains, smoke, fume, and smolder. So impermanent are conditioned objects, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough to become dissatisfied with all conditioned objects, enough to become free from strong feelings toward them, enough to be liberated from them. 7. There comes a time when after a long time, the seventh sun appears. With the appearance of the seventh sun, this great earth and Sinuru, the king of mountains, burst into flames, blazed up brightly, and become one mass of flame, as the great earth and Sinuru, and blazing and burning, the flame cast up by the wind, rises even to the Brahma world, heavenly realm, as Sinuru is blazing up and burning, as it is undergoing destruction and being overcome by a great mountain peaks of 100 yojanas distincture great, mountain peaks of 200 yojanas, 300 yojanas, 400 yojanas, 500 yojanas disintegrate. When this great earth of Sinuru, the king of mountains, are blazing and burning, neither ashes nor soot are seen, just as when ghee or oil are blazing and burning, neither ashes nor soot are seen. So it is when this great earth and Sinuru, the king of mountains, are blazing and burning. So impermanent are conditioned objects, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough to become dissatisfied with all conditioned objects, enough to become free from strong feelings toward them, enough to be liberated from them. Monks, when except those who have seen the true world think or understand, this great earth and Sinuru, the king of mountains, will burn up, be destroyed, and will no longer exist. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So the main teaching that the Buddha is sharing here is about impermanence. This is something that you learn in the very beginning in most foundational classes, but he's going through a lot of details here to really illustrate this in detail. So here he's saying, conditioned objects are impermanent, conditioned objects are unstable, conditioned objects are unreliable. And this is such an important teaching because the underlying problem that's causing all these discontent feelings is the mind's craving permanence. If an individual didn't understand the universal truth of impermanence, they would have no ability to get to enlightenment whatsoever through elimination of these strong feelings, because they wouldn't understand that the mind is craving permanence. So here the Buddha is saying how dissatisfied that the mind becomes of all conditioned objects, because the mind is craving this permanence. And the Buddha, of course, his teachings are leading to the elimination of strong feelings towards these conditioned objects, that the mind can be liberated from no longer craving permanence towards them. And now he goes through a bunch of examples of things with the environment. Essentially what he's talking about is climate change and how the world is constantly changing and all these different aspects of the world are changing. And he's saying that these impermanent objects are unstable and unreliable. But then ultimately what he gets to after he goes through all these examples is he comes to this one here where he says, who except those who have seen the truth would think or understand? This great earth in Siniro, the king of the mountains, will burn up, be destroyed, and will no longer exist. So what he's saying is, who except those who would understand and seen the truth of the universal truth of impermanence would ever think that this entire world is going to constantly be changing and be destroyed and no longer exist? Right? That's essentially what he's saying. Like, there's people in the world that crave for humanity to be permanent. The idea of humanity no longer existing on the world produces a lot of discontentedness in their mind. Or the idea of things constantly changing in the world will produce discontentedness in their mind. So the Buddha is saying, who except those who have seen the truth would think or understand that essentially this big entire world is going to constantly be changing, in this earth and humanity, he's not talking about humanity here, but I'm adding that part in there. Who would ever think that humanity would no longer exist? Humanity arose, it's changed, and it's going to fade away. It's going to no longer exist someday. But oftentimes the mind is craving that permanence and wanting humanity to exist for all time. But this just isn't possible if you understand the universal truth of impermanence. But who would understand when I say humanity is no longer going to exist someday? who's going to understand that except for those who have seen the truth? Those who have seen the truth with the universal truth of impermanence would be like, yep, that's 100% true, and they would understand that. But if the mind's craving permanence, of course, there's going to be discontentedness there. So let me know if you guys have any questions on this very detailed teaching and lots of examples of the universal truth of impermanence. Okay, Helena, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I'm just curious, who's the king of the mountains? Sinuru?
This is what they would refer to as this big, large mountain. This was like a very big, significant mountain during their lifetime, and they would call it the king of the mountains because it's such a huge, enormous mountain.
Okay, thank you.
Vibhav, you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering why he used the idea of like having multiple suns when I guess we would, and he would also know that there's only one sun around the earth, or like in the solar system.
Yeah, so when people are doing predictions, even an enlightened being, a fully perfectly enlightened Buddha, and they're predicting what's going to transpire in the future, they oftentimes can't see with 100% certainty of exactly what's going to happen. So you can see things like this. So essentially what he's talking about is he's talking about the world heating up and becoming a hotter place. That's what he's talking about. But the way that they think that's going to occur 2,500 years ago is there's going to be new suns that appear. Nowadays, we have more wisdom to understand that that's not the case, but essentially what he's talking about is how the world is becoming a hotter and hotter and hotter place, and that the water is evaporating, and that these rivers and these oceans are starting to change and shift because of this heat.
Yeah, thank you.
Looks like we have a question here in Zoom from Chris. Chris is asking, if humanity ceases to exist around 80,000, I think what you mean there is 82,018 AD, would it only be Homo sapiens on Earth that cease to exist, or would all humans across the entire universe cease to exist? You know, this isn't really something that I go into in a lot of detail because it is partially speculation about the world, but from what I know and what I understand is that humanity has another 80,000 years before it's over, where humans will no longer exist, which is actually a blink of an eye compared to the 4.5 billion years that the world has been in existence, or at least the Earth has been in existence. Whether that occurs or whether it doesn't occur isn't going to change somebody's ability to get to enlightenment, but that is something that I know about and something that the Buddha essentially talks about as well. But in my opinion, it's all of humanity that's going to cease to exist at that point. And then the second thing that Chris is asking is, would beings continue to be born in the heavenly realm, or would something prevent beings from appearing in the heavenly realm after the ending of humanity, essentially is what Chris is asking. Again, this is really speculation about the world. I don't really have a whole lot of insight into that particular aspect of it, but I know humanity has another 80,000 years to live. Chris is adding here, I suspect beings could still achieve enlightenment through the heavenly realm after that time passes. Does that make sense, or are there errors in this view? Yeah, I would suggest to set that kind of thing aside, Chris. This falls under speculation about the world, and the Buddha teaches that if you try to speculate about the world, it's going to lead to madness or frustration. So it's best to just kind of set those things aside and realize that what you need to do to get to enlightenment is cultivate the training of the mind to eliminate the pollutions of the mind and eliminating craving, desire, attachment. So there's certain questions like that that an individual might come up with in their mind, and they're going to need to just be willing to let that go and realize that we just don't have the ability to comprehend that or know that today, and that so far in the future it doesn't really matter. If you do the work now in this lifetime to get to enlightenment, you won't be around when these things are occurring anyway. So you can just set that aside, realize that speculation about the world would just be speculation, and it could lead to madness or frustration. Okay, don't see any other questions anywhere else, so let's go to the next chapter. Is there someone who would like to read this one, chapter 36? Okay, we've got Chris in there and Vibhav. So Vibhav, if you'd like to take the next one. And I can't remember whether Helena read the chapter because she had volunteered earlier too. So Helena, feel free to raise a hand if you'd like to volunteer to read one of these chapters.
So okay. Monks, when kings are unrighteous, the royal subordinates, vassals, become unrighteous. When the royal subordinates, vassals, are unrighteous, Brahmins and householders become unrighteous. When Brahmins and householders are unrighteous, the people of the towns and countryside become unrighteous. When the people of the towns and countryside are unrighteous, the sun and moon proceed off course. When the sun and moon proceed off course, the constellations and the stars proceed off course. When the constellation and the stars proceed off course, day and night proceed off course. When day and night proceed off course, the months and weeks proceed off course. When the months and weeks proceed off course, the seasons and years proceed off course. When the seasons and years proceed off course, the winds blow off course and at random. When the winds blow off course and at random, the deities become upset. When the deities are upset, sufficient rain does not fall. When sufficient rain does not fall, the crops ripen irregularly. When people eat crops that ripen irregularly, they become short-lived, ugly, weak, and sickly. Then the Tathagata tell, with the opposite causes, with the opposite results. Monks, when kings are righteous, the royal subordinates, vassals, become righteous. When sufficient rain falls, the crops ripen in season. When people eat crops that ripen in season, they become long-lived, beautiful, strong, and healthy.
All right, thank you, Chris. So as I've shared before, the Buddha is a master at showing this cause and effect and how these certain causes lead from one thing to another, to another, to another, to another. And here he's talking about a leader of a population of people, the kings, right? But we could look at this as a boss, as a parent, as somebody that's leading any population of people. If that person is unrighteous, meaning they're doing unwholesome things, then the people around them are also going to become unwholesome, right? Because that leader is setting an example. So here the Buddha is saying, okay, as a leader, if you're setting a poor example and doing unwholesome things, the people around you are going to do unwholesome things. And you can see this if you're a parent and you yell and holler and scream at your children probably yell and holler and scream at you too, or other people, right? Or if you're into unwholesome things, if you're using drugs and alcohol and things like this, you might find that your children are doing those same exact things potentially. Or if you're a boss and maybe you don't really watch deadlines very closely and you don't turn in projects on time, you might see that your employees do the same kind of things. So the Buddha is showing this cause and effect here, and he's going through all these different cause and effects to eventually get to the point where he's talking about how people become sickly, weak, and short-lived, that all these things is what leads to those types of things. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is, just showing this cause and effect and cause and effect. And what you can take away from this particular teaching is that it's wise to be wholesome, of course, and do wholesome things, particularly if you're leading any particular group of people, even if it's 2 or 3 people in a family unit, or whether you're a boss or an employer, or you're a president or a king or anything like this. It's wise to do wholesome things because then more and more people around you will do wholesome things as well. So let me know if you guys have questions here. Okay, looks like Helena has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. This fragment looks quite poetic. It's a bit different from usual. And what about deities? Could you please explain that?
Yeah, so down here, the Buddha talks about deities, and I've only seen him talk about this in very few kinds of places. I don't see him referencing that very much, so I really don't have much information on that, but I've only seen it maybe in 2, maybe 3 discourses at most where he kind of references deities. Here, I think what he's referring to is like beings that are associated with the heavenly realm. Like he talks about Saka, the ruler of the heavenly beings. Of course, he talks about all the different gods and things like this, and I think that's what he's referring to.
Okay, thank you. And then he's talking about people being short-lived and ugly if they eat like bad crops. So then it's quite obvious, actually. Do I understand correctly that there's like two types of karma that can result in short life, for example? One would be like anger and like those emotional things, and the other one would be just eating bad food and the physical stuff.
Yeah, there's multiple things that could lead to a short life, but those are two of them, right? Being angry, being bitter and harsh and hostile, eating unhealthy food. That's the way you can look at this, right? Like eating unhealthy food, it would lead to a shorter life. I see that with my mom. She ate a lot of unhealthy food. She died at the age of 66 because of that. So during his lifetime, it was eating crops that weren't, ripened properly. During our time, we might think about processed food, lots of preservatives and dyes and chemicals and things like that. That's going to lead to a shorter life. Whereas if you're eating more natural foods and plants and vegetables and things that are grown, this is going to lead to a better, longer life. But there's more than just those two things that you're referring to that would lead to a shorter lifespan. Sometimes the mind thinks that there's only going to be one thing that leads to a particular result, but there's multiple things that could lead to a shortened lifespan, and those are two of them.
And like what other things could lead to that?
Well, if you murdered people, which comes from your anger, right? But that is going to lead to a shorter lifespan, those kinds of things like that. If you have unwise moral conduct where you're interacting with people in unwise ways, that can lead to a shorter lifespan. All of that's coming from craving, anger, and ignorance. That's the root of that. So when we say anger, that kind of encapsulates all those kinds of things. But there's various actions that could lead to those kinds of things. Unwise decisions. Say that you're an auto mechanic and you have a car jacked up in the air and you don't take safety precautions and you go underneath of the car because of your lack of wisdom, and maybe you're craving to hurry up and fix this car and you take shortcuts in order to not apply safety precautions that this car could potentially drop on you and kill you, that could lead to a shorter lifespan. So anytime you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's going to produce unwholesome results. But there are specific things we can look at, like anger, killing, eating unhealthy foods, things like this. It's definitely going to lead to a shorter lifespan.
Wow, thank you. Mm-hmm. And lastly, what do you think is more hurtful, like more hurting the body more, unhealthy food or anger?
It would be hard to say one versus the other because they're both really unwise, and I would encourage people to get rid of both.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, so I don't see any other questions. Oh, there's from Hihang, I think. Yes, Hihang.
Thank you. Could you please go up a little bit? I think I was having question about, thank you. I think there was one, the action and result transfer from people of the towns and countryside are unrich as sun and the moon proceed of course. Why would this be?
Yeah, so the actions that we take as human beings is going to affect our climate and our environment. That's essentially what the Buddha is talking about in these two discourses that we just studied, or the couple that we just studied, is he's talking about climate change. And he's talking about how decisions that we make as human beings are going to affect the weather and the environment. Because if we're unrighteous, meaning we're doing unwholesome things, that we're treating each other with bitterness and harshness and hostility, and we're not caring for each other as human beings, we're going to do the same thing towards the planet and the environment. And we see this in today's life. And because of that, we're going to experience unwholesome results related to the climate and the environment that we live in.
I see. Yeah, I do feel like this is what is happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
That's the amazing thing about studying these teachings from 2,500 years ago. Even though the Buddha is sometimes saying things like fourth sun, fifth sun, things like this, but if you really deeply understand how these things are communicated, you can see the Buddha is describing exactly what we're experiencing now, because these things were happening during his lifetime to a certain degree, and they're happening now as well. And you can just see how true his teachings really are.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay. Helena has something here. There's no chance he's talking about astrology when he mentions the stars here. Yeah, he's talking about that too, but this is essentially what he's referring to is the changing of the environment. But yeah, there's going to be changes in the sun and the stars, which is going to then affect the health of the planet and the environment, because when those things are changing, then it's going to put certain forces on the earth that are going to change our climate and our environment. Okay, so let me see if we have any questions on Facebook or YouTube. All right, I don't see any there. So let's go to the next chapter, which is chapter 37. Here you go, Helena. This is a good one for you. You were just asking this question. Would you like to read this one? Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Causes of a decrease in people's lifespan. The king established guard and protection, but he did not give property to the needy, and it became widespread. Thus, from the not giving of property to the needy, poverty became widespread. From the growth of poverty, the taking of what was not given increased. From the increase of theft, the use of weapons increased. From the increased use of weapons, the taking of life increased. And from the increase in the taking of life, people's lifespan decreased, their beauty decreased, and as a result of this decrease of lifespan and beauty, the children of those whose lifespan had been 80,000 years lived for only 40,000 years. Thus, from the not giving of property to the needy, the taking of life increased, and from the taking of life, lying increased. From the increase in lying, people's lifespan decreased, their beauty decreased, and as a result, the children of those whose lifespan had been 40,000 years lived for only 20,000 years. Thus, from the not giving of property to the needy, the speaking evil of others increased, and in consequence, people's lifespan decreased, their beauty decreased, and as a result, the children of those whose lifespan had been 20,000 years lived only 10,000 years. Thus, from the not giving of property to the needy, sexual misconduct increased, and their beauty decreased, and as a result, whose lifespan had been 10,000 years, lived for only 5,000 years. And among the generation whose lifespan was 500 years, two things increased: harsh speech and idle chatter, in consequence of which people's lifespan decreased, their beauty decreased, and as a result, the children of those whose lifespan had been 5,000 years lived, some for 2,500 years, and some for only 2,000 years. And among the generation whose lifespan was 2,500 years, craving and anger increased, and in consequence, people's lifespan decreased, their beauty decreased, and as a result, the children of those whose lifespan had been 2,500 years lived for only 1,000 years. Among the generation whose lifespan was 1,000 years, false opinions increased, and as a result, the children of those whose lifespan had been 1,000 years lived for only 500 years. And among the generation whose lifespan was 500 years, three things increased: incest, excessive greed, and unwholesome practices increased. And as a result, the children of those whose lifespan had been 500 years lived, some of 250 years, some for only 200 years. And among those whose lifespan was 250 years, these things increased: lack of respect for mother and father, for ascetics and Brahmins, and for the head of the community. Thus, from the not giving of property to the needy, lack of respect for mother and father, for ascetics and Brahmins, and for the head of the community increased, and in consequence, people's lifespan and beauty decreased, and the children of those whose lifespan had been 2.5 centuries lived for only 100 years. Monks, a time will come when the children of these people will have a lifespan of 10 years, and with them, girls will be marriageable at 5 years old, and with them, these flavors will disappear: ghee, butter, sesame oil, molasses, and salt. Among them, Kudrusa grain will be the chief food, just as rice and curry are today. And with them, the 10 courses of disappear, and the 10 courses of evil will prevail exceedingly. For those of a 10-year lifespan, there will be no word for moral. So how can there be anyone who acts in a moral way? Those people who have no respect for mother or father, for ascetics and Brahmins, for the head of the community, will be the ones who enjoy honor and prestige, just as it is now for the people who show respect for mother and father, for ascetics and Brahmins, who are praised and honored. So it will be with those who do the opposite. Among those of a 10-year lifespan, no account will be taken of mother or aunt, of mother's sister-in-law, of one, and so on. All will be promiscuous in the world like sheep, fowl, and pigs, dogs and jackals. Among them, fierce hostility will prevail, one for another, fierce hatred, fierce anger, and thoughts of killing, mother against child, and child against mother, father against child, and child against father, brother against brother, brother against sister, just as the hunter feels hatred for the beast he stalks. And for those of a 10-year lifespan, there will come to be a short interval of 7 days, during which they will mistake one another for wild beasts. Sharp swords will appear in their hands, and thinking beast, they will take each other's lives with those swords. But there will be some beings who do not want to take part in this killing. They went into hiding for 7 days. Then, at the end of the 7 days, they will emerge from their hiding places and rejoice together as one community, saying, "Wholesome beings, I see that you're alive, so let us now do good." And through having undertaken such wholesome things, they will increase in lifespan gradually from 10 years back to 80,000 years again. And in that time, an arahant, fully enlightened Buddha named Maitreya, will arise in the world.
Okay,
Thank
excellent.
you.
Thank you, Helena. So as you might have come to the conclusion, what the Buddha is describing is the time frame that we're in right now, that he's describing all these various things leading one to another that ultimately describe humanity declining and going into this complete decline. And then this fully perfectly enlightened Buddha, Maitreya, arising in the world to bring the teachings of the Buddha and restore them in such a way that countless people will ultimately get to enlightenment, and we'll see more and more beings getting to enlightenment. So here, the way that I suggest that you take a discourse like this, because he's describing how a king establishes guard and protection, but he does not give property to the needy. He doesn't help out of loving kindness and compassion. And the result is poverty becomes widespread. And he's leading to all these different causes and effects that lead to a particular declining of humanity. But the way that I suggest that you take a discourse like this is look at all the things that the Buddha is sharing that leads to decline in a population of people, and choose to wisely not do those things. Right? So here, what the Buddha is describing is taking up of weapons. He's talking about priests of lying. He's talking about speaking evil of others. He's talking about sexual misconduct. And he goes on and on. He talks about, harsh speech, idle chatter. He talks about incest. He talks about all these different things. As you read through a discourse like this, you would like to just be taking mental notes of ensuring that you're not conducting any of these things and not contributing to this. Because while he's talking about it, appears to most people when they read it that he's talking about this lifespan of 80,000 years becoming 40,000 and 20,000 and so forth and so on. In my opinion, he's not talking about an individual human that lives for that particular time. He's talking about the time frame of humanity, that humanity's lifespan basically decreases to the point of we have 10 more years before humanity basically experiences mass catastrophic problems. And that's what we're experiencing now, is that we're in this period of time where climate has become so detrimental, people are treating each other so poorly, that we kind of know that we have like the next 10 years to really make significant improvements. And otherwise, humanity is going to experience great calamity. And then what he's talking about is once we get down to this 10-year lifespan where humanity is going to only have this extra 10 years before we meet this mass calamity, he talks about the things that are going on during that time. And he's basically describing what we're experiencing now, where people are killing each other, where they're being promiscuous sexually and having all kinds of issues in terms of moral conduct. People are taking up weapons and killing each other for just, no real significant purpose whatsoever. And he's saying that we go through these 7 days of a period of time where people are actively killing each other significantly, but the people who are into wholesome things kind of retreat and go away. And then eventually this fully enlightened Buddha comes into the world. Now these wholesome beings come out and kind of look at each other like, hey, we're still here and we're going to be doing some wholesome things now. So here, instead of 7 days, because remember, a Buddha, oftentimes when they're predicting things way in the future, it's not 100% accurate. In my opinion, this is not 7 days. This is actually 7 years from the time that Maitreya Buddha arises in the world until the time that the world is starting to become more and more aware of this individual's existence. It's actually 7 years, that of time frame that goes through this period of time where there's just mass calamity in the world. And then Maitreya Buddha is being able to be observed through more and more people becoming aware of this person's existence. So the way that I encourage you to really take a discourse like this is to extrapolate the things that are unwise and choose to not do those things. That's what you would like to essentially do from a discourse like this. Whether these things are exactly going to happen in exactly the way that the Buddha is describing isn't really of much importance. What's really important is that you learn the wholesome things and unwholesome things, and then you wisely choose to do wholesome things and you wisely choose to not do these unwholesome things. So let me know if you guys have questions on this particular discourse. So it looks like Chris has a question. Go ahead, sir.
It's potentially maybe a little off topic, but it's also on topic, because I found it very odd and I don't really know what it means. How the sutta where it talks about a mother going against their daughter and a father going against their son and a son against their father. That is pretty much word for word as what Jesus Christ said that he came to do. And I don't really know what to make of it. And I just, if it wasn't word for word, I wouldn't be correlating the two, but it's more or less word for word. So was it that it got mistranslated and then the Roman Empire reversed it? It just, have you noticed that, how that scripture is pretty much word for word, the same as in the sutta?
I didn't look at that closely, but whenever you're looking at the teachings of the Buddha, while you can see correlations to other teachings like Jesus Christ or Prophet Muhammad or Hindu teachings and stuff like this, I would encourage you to kind of set all that aside and just really focus on what the Buddha is teaching, because that's what's going to lead to your enlightenment and your liberation of mind. Okay, so Helena, you have a question?
Thank you. Yeah, so, David, I struggle with understanding one thing. It's like, in my view, Earth is doing, because when I read about the history of any country I visit, it's always bloody and terrible, or almost always. And now I feel like we're doing better and better, and there's more consciousness in society. And that's just my impression. And it seems from those teachings in more than just today's class, and I've got an impression that you think too, that we are at the lowest point. So could you please clarify this?
Yeah, when we look at global conflict, versus these similar types of events that happened in the past. In the past, you would have one kingdom attack another kingdom, right? You might have 3,000 soldiers going against 5,000 soldiers, and now, maybe 500 of them die, right, during that particular war or battle. And then ultimately one empire conquers the other, right? So during those time frames, we saw a lot of blood and a lot of problems with people fighting. We see the same thing now today, but it's on a much more massive scale because the weaponry that we have today is much more significant than what we saw back in the past. And not only do we see a lot of death due to our advanced weaponry, but we also see on a personal basis, we see more murder and death, I suspect. I don't know that we have records dating back to how many murders existed or happened in the past, but nowadays I've seen studies that say that even in America, I think I remember it being either 100 or 150 murders per day occur in America. That's just one country. That's not the entire world. So I would suspect that what we see in terms of death and destruction today, while it's not the massive, or while it's not the wars that we saw in the past, like one empire trying to conquer the other, I suspect that we see a lot more death today than we did back then because of our advanced weaponry, and not just that being available at like a governmental level, but individuals killing each other. It's so much easier to kill an individual today than it was, 2,500 years ago because of the weaponry that we have available to us. There isn't probably any statistics about how many murders and deaths occurred 2,500 years ago, but I suspect that we're much higher than that. It would have to be done on a per capita basis because our population is a lot higher now. We have 8 billion people, where back during 2,500 years ago, the data that I've seen says that there was only 100 million people in the entire world during the lifetime of the Buddha. There's almost more people than that just in Thailand itself. There's like 70 million people in Thailand. So our population has grown significantly, and death and destruction, in my opinion, has significantly increased as well. Even though we don't see countries battling each other frequently, when we do see those battles, we'll see 10,000, 100,000, 300,000 people dying in just one conflict, which I don't suspect was the case during 2,500 years ago because the weaponry didn't exist that exists today, and the population of people didn't exist as there exists today.
Okay, I understand a bit more. It's just that I have still one doubt. Like when it comes to women, for example, like nowadays being a woman and being alive, I can do literally whatever I want. But like, let's say 150 years ago, I would have been a property of someone legally. So I guess I still cling to this perception that we are doing better nowadays than ever before. What do you think?
There are certain aspects of our society that have surely improved, right? There's certainly things like that. Like, by and large, there's not slavery in the world like once existed. There is still human slavery in the world, but not as prevalent as it was once in the past. So while there has been progress and improvement in certain areas, we're still experiencing massive amounts of disease and illness and destruction and killing and these kinds of things at the hands of advanced weaponry that we didn't have 2,500 years ago. So it's not to say that there hasn't been any progress in certain areas, but you got to look at things from a global perspective in multiple topics, not just women's rights or human rights, because those things have certainly improved. But on a whole, you can see like a lot of things have really declined because of our craving, anger, and ignorance, essentially, is what's causing this. But you have to be able to look deeper than just maybe your own personal experience of whether or not you are better off today than you would have been 200 or 300 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And also, I don't know in the past what it was like for poverty and famine. I don't know how widespread those things were in the past, but we see, a significant amount of poverty and famine in the world today too. Okay, Vibhav, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering on what Helena's question. It's quite possible that some societies are, or a lot of societies, much safer for general population because you have increased policing and all these kind of things. But I guess one of the fundamentals that maybe the Buddha is talking about here is more about how we deal with other people, the harshness, harsh speech, lying, and sexual misconduct, those kind of things that are also causing discontentedness. And so if people are not a lot of people are not respectful to each other, or they're not trusting of each other, and we are not treating people in a nice manner. So that's also what he is talking about here. So it's probably all of these things combined.
It's important to understand that it's not how people treat each other that's causing discontentedness. It's the craving, desire, attachment, that discourse that we discussed at the very beginning of class. The harsh speech, the way that we treat each other, sure, that's unwise, but that's not what's causing the discontentedness.
Sure, yeah. Sorry, I misstated that. But yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the way that I suggest you guys take a discourse like this is look at the things that the Buddha is describing that are unwholesome, and then just make conscious choices to not do these things. Instead of contributing to the decline of the world, instead look at doing wholesome things. Be part of that group of people that he talks about at the end, which are into wholesome things and do wholesome things. That's what's going to lead to your improvement in this world. Okay, it looks like Vibhav, you have something else to say? Oh no, okay. Looks like Helena had a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. This may be a bizarre question, but those 7 years of violence, or 7 days that he's describing here, is he talking about the apocalypse or something like that?
No, what he's talking about is essentially what we're experiencing now. You see mass calamity in the world where there's just so much killing going on right now. If you look at the war in Ukraine, you look at the war in Israel, at what's going on in places like the USA and things like this, there's just massive amounts of unwholesomeness. You see government after government that is doing corrupt things. You see, monarchs and kings doing corrupt things. I mean, it's almost like there's no organization or no institution that exists in the world that we can hold up and we can say this is an organization or this is a government body that is doing things in a way that is perfect, essentially, in that they're conducting themselves in a way that people can ultimately respect, have appreciation for. That it seems like every time you turn around, there's some stain on a particular organization. And this is leading people to distrust their governments and any organization of people that are supposed to be there to help and help society and help humanity. Every time you turn around, there's some scandal or some corruption that is helping us to be able to see that people aren't making wise decisions in these different groups and organizations.
Wow, I see it. But maybe this is the apocalypse from the Christian vision.
I'm not 100% sure what people mean by apocalypse, but we're definitely going through a period of time that is very difficult for humanity. But there's a better way, which is this middle way that the Buddha taught. And I just encourage everybody to focus on that, because that's what's going to help you in your life. And then as you set that good example, the people around you will start to be able to see that as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, it looks like Chris has a hand up. Go ahead, sir.
One of the things that I would like to have you address is, despite a lot of the mistakes and corruption in the government, different governments, I would say that the United States is fairly generous with people who have disability and people who are homeless. So I'm wondering if a lot of this, of the cause and effect of not giving if the United States made wise decisions in having, welfare and things like that.
Well, if you look at places around the world, there's some places that have a tremendous amount of homelessness, which we could consider to be poverty, and that problem continues to persist. And there hasn't been, concerted efforts to really figure out how to drastically improve this. And this is part of that cause and effect that is being experienced, that in a community of people where, people aren't supported and encouraged and uplifted and provided skills and growth and development, you can have a slow deterioration of a community. And there's a better way, but it needs people to understand that better way. And that's what the Buddha is teaching. Chris, I see you have a bunch of questions in the chat. If it's okay with you, I'm just going to go on because we have 3 more chapters here and I'm just looking at the time and I'd like to be respectful of that. Maybe we can handle those questions offline if it's okay for you. Yeah? Okay. Thank you. All right. Let me get down here. Is there someone who would like to read chapter 38? Okay. Go ahead, Vibhav.
Craving, anger, and ignorance. Monks, wanderers of other communities may ask you, friends, there are these 3 things. What 3? Craving, greed, anger, hatred, and ignorance, delusion, unknowing of true reality. These are the 3. What, friends, is the distinction, the disparity, the difference between them? If you were asked this, how would you answer? Monks, if wanderers of other communities should ask you such a question, you should answer them as follows. Craving, greed, friend, is slightly blameworthy, responsible for wrongdoing, but slow to fade away. Anger, hatred is very blameworthy, responsible for wrongdoing, but quick to fade away. Ignorance, delusion is very blameworthy, responsible for wrongdoing, and slow to fade away. Suppose they ask, but friends, what is the reason unarisen craving arises, and arisen craving increases and expands? You should answer, an attractive object. For one who attends carelessly to unattractive objects, unarisen craving arises and arisen craving increases and expands. This, friends, is the reason unarisen craving arises and arisen craving increases and expands. Suppose they ask, but what, friends, is the reason unarisen anger arises and unarisen anger increases and expands? You should answer, a repulsive object. For one who attends carelessly to a repulsive object, unarisen anger arises and unarisen anger increases and expands. This, friends, is the reason unarisen anger increases and expands. Suppose they ask, but what, friends, is the reason unrisen ignorance, unknowing of true reality arises, and arisen ignorance, unknowing of true reality increases and expands? You should answer, careless attention. For one who attends carelessly, unarisen ignorance, and knowing of true reality arises and arisen ignorance and knowing of true reality increases and expands. This, friends, is the reason unarisen ignorance arises and arisen ignorance and knowing of true reality increases and expands. Suppose they ask, but what, friends, is the reason arisen craving does not arise and arisen craving is abandoned? You should answer, an unattractive object. For one who attends carefully to an unattractive object, unarisen craving does not arise and arisen craving is abandoned. This, friend, is the reason unarisen craving is a. Suppose they ask, but what, friends, unarisen anger does not arise and arisen anger is abandoned? You should answer, the liberation of mind by loving kindness. For one who attends carefully to the liberation of the mind by loving kindness, unarisen anger does not arise and arisen anger. This, friend, is the reason arisen anger does not arise and arisen anger is abandoned. Suppose they ask, but what, friends, is the reason arisen ignorance reality does not arise and arisen ignorance? You should answer, careful attention. For one who attends carefully, arisen ignorance, unknowing of true reality does not arise, and arisen ignorance, unknowing. This, friends, is the reason arisen ignorance, unknowing of true reality does not arise, and arisen ignorance, unknowing of true reality is abandoned.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So here the Buddha is referencing the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots or the 3 fires, which is craving, anger, and ignorance. And most of you guys have learned with me when I've talked about those in other programs and other courses and retreats and so forth. So here he's talking about this careless attention and this careful attention. What he's talking about here is how you make decisions. That if you're careless and you're not paying attention with mindfulness to your craving and your anger, that's what's going to arise, the craving and anger. It's going to allow that to continue to persist in the mind. That you need to have careful attention with your mindfulness or awareness of mind, that whenever craving or anger is arising, that you abandon it. And the same thing with ignorance, that if you have careful attention, meaning you're paying close attention to the decisions that you're making, this is what's going to abandon the ignorance, thus eliminate craving and anger as well. Because while we refer to it as craving, anger, and ignorance, it's really because of ignorance that craving and anger continues to exist. So by having careful attention, which is the ultimate theme of what the Buddha is describing here, this helps you to make wiser and wiser decisions, and you can abandon craving and anger. And of course, you need other things besides just careful attention, but that's one component of someone who's moving to enlightenment, is that you don't just haphazardly go through life and making unwise decisions, that you consult with each one of the decisions that you make and consider whether or not it would be wise or unwise. And where you need help, that's where you reach out for the advice of a teacher. Because as you come to understand the natural law of karma very closely, what you realize is every single decision that you make is either going to be wise or unwise. And every single decision that you make, either wise or unwise, is going to produce either wholesome or unwholesome results. Unwholesome karma or wholesome karma. So every decision that you put into the world, it's going to produce an effect or a result. And what you would like to be able to do is have careful attention with every single decision that you make. And this is going to be challenging for a mind that has craving, anger, and ignorance. And that's why you're gradually bringing that down and then gradually increasing the generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. These are the antidotes to craving, anger, and ignorance. But you need to be able to pay careful attention to each individual decision that you're making as you're traversing through the earth. And this is going to promote wiser and wiser decision making that leads to more and more wholesome results. So any questions here on this particular chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Oh, here's a question from Mayu Lee on Facebook. She's asking, when I was reading this chapter on my own before class, close to the end of the sutta, I started to get emotional and cried. Tears ran down my eyes uncontrollably. I understand this is my cravings for permanent, craving for everyone to be well and to be kind to each other. Although I fully understand and absorb the truth of impermanence, sometimes the mind sneaked up on me and I allowed it to continue. I should have applied the 4 foundations of mindfulness and cut it off, but I didn't. I was being complacent. Am I understanding this correct, sir? What would you recommend? So this is probably in reference to the previous chapter. Yeah, you're seeing that very clearly, Mayuli. That's exactly what's transpiring, and that's exactly how you would like to remedy it. So good, you understand that. All right. I don't see any other questions anywhere. So let's go on to the next chapter. This is chapter 39. Is there someone who would like to read this? Maybe I'll read this one. Okay, so I haven't read for the entire Pali Canon English study group, so maybe I'll read this one. All right, this is chapter 39. This is 8 qualities are fit to share this message. What he's going to talk about here is 8 things that you would like to have as qualities before you go out into the world and you start sharing these teachings with students. Monks. A monk who is possessed of 8 qualities is fit to share this message. What are the 8? Herein, monks. 1. A monk is a listener. 2. One who engages others to listen. 3. One who assesses or analyzes. 4. One who recollects or recalls and remembers. 5. One who is a knower or wise. 6. One who is an expounder, explains. 7. One skilled in recognizing accordance and non-accordance. 8. One who is not a maker of arguments. Who to some high assembled council comes, wavers not, nor in discourse fails, nor hides the teachings, nor speaks in doubtfulness, and who, being questioned, is not agitated. A monk like this is fit to share this message. Okay, so as I mentioned, what he's talking about here are qualities that you need to possess in order to be able to go out into the world and guide others to enlightenment. The first one is you need to be a good listener. Right? You need to be able to listen to what the students are asking questions about. One who engages others to listen, motivating and encouraging people to listen to the teachings. One who assesses and analyzes the teachings, essentially what the Buddha is talking about here, that you don't just believe what it is that's being shared, but you investigate. As a teacher, you need to be a very best student. In order to be a great teacher, you need to be an excellent student. And you need to analyze and you need to assess the teachings, investigating and examining them. And that's what's going to lead to cultivation of wisdom to then be able to help others. One who recollects or recalls and remembers the teachings. You need to have a certain amount of memory of the teachings. You need to have certain wisdom of the teachings. One who is a knower. And then also one who is an expounder. That it's not just the discourses that you can describe, but you can expound upon them. And you can not add your own thoughts necessarily or like teach something that's not there, but you can expound beyond just what it is that the Buddha is explaining, giving your own analogies, for example, not changing the teachings of the Buddha, but just elaborating on them further so the student can understand them. One skilled in recognizing accordance and non-accordance. What he means here is that as a teacher, you need to be able to help a student to see when they're practicing the teachings well and when they're not practicing the teachings well. This is going to help a student to basically train their mind and get to enlightenment. So a teacher needs to be able to recognize that within their students, not just in their own practice, because as a great student, you would have identified those things within your own practice, but you're going to need to be able to identify those in other people's practices too. And then one who is not a maker of arguments, right? A person who's going to go out and share these teachings need to be sure that you're not instigating arguments with people. And then ultimately what he talks about here, which is really important, is that if you're sharing these teachings and you go to a high assembled council, meaning people who are very famous or wealthy or well off in the community, that you don't waver in your discourses, like, oh, I'm going to change what I'm saying just because I'm maybe afraid of these rich and powerful people. Someone who's enlightened isn't going to have that. They're going to know what the teachings are, and whether they're talking to someone who is just living a modest lifestyle, or someone who's this rich, famous person, they would be able to share the teachings exactly the way they need to be shared without wavering in their description of the teachings. So they're not wavering in the discourses, they're not hiding the teachings, they're not speaking with doubtfulness. If you doubt whether the teachings of the Buddha actually lead to enlightenment or not, you shouldn't be anywhere near teaching other students, because you still haven't even gotten to the first stage of enlightenment yet. So if you start teaching students and you have doubt, you're just going to be spreading this doubt all over the world, and people are not going to be able to learn and grow and develop to get to enlightenment. You need to get to the point where you're either in the fourth stage of enlightenment, meaning actually enlightened, or very close to it, maybe in the third stage. But even the Buddha himself talks to me how difficult it would be for someone to share the teachings who actually still has craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind. And as part of that, the mind could have doubtfulness. And if you're doubting the teachings, you shouldn't be anywhere near people who are interested in learning how to get to enlightenment, because you yourself don't even know whether or not the teachings lead to enlightenment. So how could you actually guide others to this mental state? And then lastly, he talks about one who's not agitated by questions. If a teacher is agitated by students asking questions, that person shouldn't be teaching, because students are going to have many, many, many questions, and they don't always word them in a respectful and kind and polite way, right? So a teacher that is either enlightened or very close to it would be able to listen to any and all questions that a student asks without being agitated. And this is going to set an example for others about how to interact in the world. But if a teacher is agitated, they're in the wrong livelihood, because students are going to have questions. And as a teacher, a student isn't going to understand you 100% of the time when you first are teaching any particular topic. They're going to have questions. So an individual needs to be sure that they allow students to ask any and all questions that they like without agitation. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter. Okay, Chris is asking a question here. What about discussing the message as a student with fellow students and interested parties instead of as a teacher to get better at right speech? Yeah, that's, just kind of sharing casually with your individual friends or family members or things like that. This isn't what the Buddha's talking about here. He's talking about going out and actually taking on students and guiding a community of people to enlightenment. Vibhav is asking the question, is this teaching not in a sutta? It seems to be a collected teaching from a book. Yeah, there's some books that are correlation of the teachings. In this particular book, it has a collection of the Vinaya, which is what the Buddha is teaching the monks. So the Vinaya, or however that word's pronounced, this is basically the section of the Pali Canon that's specifically for the monks. This is largely inaccessible to most people, but there's some books that have actually put it together. So this particular discourse is coming from this book, but it is part of the original Pali Canon. I just don't have the reference for that, so that's why it's being referenced from this particular book. Okay, let me see if we have any questions anywhere else. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere else. So that brings us to our last chapter for today. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Helena, go ahead, ma'am. Oh, we got Pat too. I saw Helena's hand first. Sorry, Pat.
Yes, let's Pat read, please.
Oh, okay, sure. Go ahead, Pat.
Thank you, Helen. The falsehood, even as a joke. So unwise and empty, Rahula, is the recluseship life practice of those who are not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie. So too, Rahula, when one is not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie, there is no evil. I say that one would not do. Therefore, Rahula, you should trim up. I will not speak a falsehood, even as a joke.
Okay, thank you, sir. So here the Buddha is talking to his son, Rahula, and teaching him that it would be unwise to tell a lie, even as a joke. So what you can understand is that Buddhists tell jokes, right? Sometimes people associated Buddha with sitting in meditation and sitting on a cloud somewhere in solemn solitude. Well, of course, a Buddha is going to meditate. They're going to have a certain amount of peacefulness and joy in the mind, but they tell jokes. They have a personality. They're enjoying life just like anybody would think that an enlightened being would, because a Buddha is an enlightened being, but they're just a unique type of individual who's gotten to enlightenment. But an enlightened being is going to enjoy life. They're going to tell jokes. They're going to have lots of fun. But you would do that without telling a lie, because if you're telling lies in your jokes, but in day-to-day life, in your work environment and stuff like this, you're trying to be trustworthy and dependable and reliable, people are going to have a hard time being able to see the difference from when you're lying as a joke versus when you're trying to tell the truth. So if you just always tell the truth, this is going to be very beneficial for your mind. So the Buddha's helping you to be able to see that, how it's so important with the natural law of karma that you're always telling the truth, even as a joke. And telling jokes that are truthful or actually take more wisdom and more thoughtfulness, and those are actually typically more funny, and people actually laugh at them because you put more work and effort into creating that joke. So if you practice this way, where you get to the point where you don't even lie as a joke, you can develop more and more influence in your community, and people will trust you and see you as being dependable and reliable, much more so than if you're lying during daily life or even as a joke. So any questions here? So it looks like Chris has a question then.
So I have a 7-year-old son, and a lot of times he likes, because we're playing, there'll be jokes about being a specific animal or something like that, just because it's maybe a lot of the fairy tale land and stuff. Would that be lying, pretending to be something that you're not, in a form of like role playing as a game? Is that lying, or is that just make believe and playing pretend? About that.
That's not lying, because he hasn't said anything. He hasn't said like, I am a horse, hear me whinny, or I'm a lion, hear me roar, right? Like he's acting, right? He's not telling a joke that is a lie, or he's not deliberately lying. He's just acting out the role of an animal or something like that.
But if in the playing the game, if me or him says something like that, would that be lying, or would that just be something else?
Yeah, that would be lying. So you can change your wording so that you're not lying. You can say things like, I am pretending to be a lion, or I am trying to function as if I am a lion, right? You can say things like that, where you're essentially communicating the same thing, but doing it in a truthful way. Okay. All right. So it looks like we don't have any other questions. Let me just check Facebook and YouTube, though, before we finish out. Okay. I don't see any questions there. So thank you all for joining for today's class. I appreciate you participating in the reading and the questions that you guys have. I really appreciate the deep, in-depth study that you guys have. I appreciate all the questions and interest and enthusiasm to really dive into these teachings. And thank you for understanding the impermanence that I'm experiencing now that I'm traveling, because I wasn't able to teach the previous class that was yesterday evening for me, but it was morning for Thai people in Thailand and other parts of the world. I wasn't able to teach that class, but I was able to teach this one because I'm going to be here now for about 10 days. So I should be able to teach all the classes going forward for the next 10 days. And then I'm going to take a short plane ride to another city, and I'm going to get established there. And it should be just fine there as well. But there could still be some more impermanence here or there. So thank you guys for understanding your teacher is impermanent. These classes are impermanent. Your ability to learn is impermanent. It's a beautiful thing because I didn't see anybody getting angry or irritated or frustrated, because I think you guys do understand impermanence and you're not craving that permanence. So thank you for that. But next week, I'm going to be sharing at 9 a.m. Thai time and 9 p.m. Thai time the next set of chapters here. We're going to go on to chapters 41 through 50 in volume 3. So if you'd like to study those, you're welcome to study those beforehand, because I teach things in there that aren't actually in the classes. So you can read either before or after the classes. And then tomorrow in our group learning program at 9 a.m. on Sunday Thai time and 9 p.m. Sunday, I'm going to be teaching Volume 1, Chapter 22, which is Mental Health, a Modern Day Delusion. This is where you're going to learn about things like ADD, ADHD, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, bulimia, anorexia, panic disorders, suicidal thoughts, things like this. And I'm going to show you how, by training your mind with the teachings of the Buddha, you can eliminate the symptoms of all of these kinds of things. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. It's actually this evening for me, but I'm trying to keep the time frame based on Thailand. It just makes it much better. But I'm not lying, right? I'm still keeping my mind framed in Thai time zones. So anyway, thank you all so much for joining. Thank you for all you guys back in Chiang Mai that are helping out to maintain the continued progress of the community, to be able to allow me to teach while I'm on the road. And I'll be back to Chiang Mai within 3 weeks or so, and we'll be back to our normal setup and all those kinds of things. But in the meantime, because of modern technology, I can still teach. So thank you all for helping. Thank you all for your dedication and diligence to learning and practicing. And perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and have a lovely rest of your day. Take care. Sawadee ka.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.